I am doing something I have never done before. I'm creating a locomotive from scratch.
This video is brought to you by Model Railroad Academy. Model Railroad Academy is your online resource for model railroad instructions, ideas, and information, with loads of tutorials and articles for model railroaders of every skill level. I've recently been going through their catalog and watching some of their older videos, including this one from Don Kassler and the M&K division of the B&O. It's been really cool to watch and see all the old techniques he used. Plus, you can find tutorials on everything from bench work to electronics to scenery, all sorts of things there. The first 1,000 people to sign up at the link in the description below will get a full year of premium membership to Model Railroad Academy for $1.49. Offer is valid for new members only.
I am using the Hextrack modular standard that I'm building to make an HON30 modular layout. For those of you that don't know, HON30 and its British counterpart 009 are narrow gauge versions of HO and 00 scale respectively. The easiest way to explain it into a millennial like me is that the narrow gauge engines from Thomas and Friends have models you can buy made by Bachmann, and they are HON30. Not the actual ones they used on the show, but the ones you buy are HON30. HON30 is HO scale running on N-gauge track, or 9mm track gauge. Fun fact, the N in N scale stands for 9mm. Now, I could just buy the engines, there are ones available commercially, but I wanted to add a bit of creative freedom, and I've always had an affinity to those bespoke tiny steam engines like the 040 Porters and those little custom engines that you see on those really small railroads that have clearly been just like built out exactly for their needs. These engines were built for a very specific purpose, so I'm going to be designing and 3D printing these engines from scratch. Well, not entirely from scratch. I'm going to be using these little chassis you can buy on eBay that come from Japan, but the rest of it's going to be scratch.
We're starting off with this little chassis that I got from a Japanese supplier. I got this off of eBay, and I will link it in the description below. It's got the motor, the gears, and everything, and it's an 040 steam chassis. So I measured it out and designed a basic shell for it for the design that I wanted in Tinkercad, printed it out, and this is what I came up with. Now this was the base shell just to test and make sure that everything works good. I didn't do all the detail that I want to do, so I went ahead and printed that out, and then it took the little chassis. You can see how small these things are, and I put that right there and just made sure that it fit. And then I put it on the chassis on the tracks, didn't glue it down or anything, but I also wanted to make sure that it ran fine, didn't have any weird hiccups before I went ahead and detailed and printed a more detailed version. Now here you see it actually come to a stop, and I need to do a little bit of a tap. I thought this was just because of the pickups are so small, but it actually foreshadowed a bit bigger of an issue that will come on later.
Okay, so my little test print fits on the chassis, and now I can get into the detail work. And to do that, I actually need to break apart the model digitally and create separate components that are going to make it easier to paint.
I break this apart into 3 sections. I've got the cab, the boiler, and then the chassis base, and then I can go to work doing detailing. This includes adding a bunch of little rivets, and then I'm also going to be doing some work up here on the boiler cap, and I'm also doing stuff with the cab. I want the cab to be a wooden cab, so I've got these planks that you can get in Tinkercad just by searching the different shapes and putting those in there as well, and I'm also going to add some rivets in there too. So I also added a little coal bunker that goes on the back. I just used some rocky shapes that are in there and just kind of mess with them and duplicated them, and then I took them into the slicer for the 3D printer. I'm using that PioCreate Halo X1 for this, and I get everything ready to go, and then I can print it out. And these are the 3 pieces that I came out with. They've got a little bit of bend from the curing, but that shouldn't be a problem. Now, one thing I accidentally did do was I did make the boiler a little bit too long, so I'm gonna have to adjust that a little bit by manually filing, but I'm using this file just to get all the burrs and smooth everything out. If I have some tighter stuff, then I would probably be using some nippers and some smaller files, but this one works just fine. I want to get the flat surfaces where I need a flat surface. So once I've done that, then I will be able to test fit everything and make sure that everything fits correctly, and then I can get to painting and detailing. Now, once I was done test fitting, I could super glue together the boiler and the chassis base. And to do this, I just made sure that I had the super glue clear of the cab because I didn't want the cab glued on there. But I also kept the cab on there so that I could use it for alignment and making sure that everything was good to go. So I got that glued on, then I was able to remove the cab, and then I had my chassis ready to go and ready for spray paint, which I'm spray painting it black. Here is how it turned out after a coat of flat black spray paint, some of those little Krylon shortcuts you can get at hobby shops. And then I needed to do a little bit more test running and making sure everything was good. You can see the little bit of jumpiness right there, more foreshadowing of an issue that I'm going to have down the road. But overall, there are no clearance issues or anything like that. So now it's time to paint for real, and I didn't have the exact wood color that I wanted, so I blended a couple together, and these are just the cheap $1, $2 a bottle acrylic paints that you can pick up at most places. And I'm using very little paint and just trying to be as simple and smooth as possible. It may take you a couple of coats to get this. Even when I am priming this, which I'm not doing for this one, you can need to take a couple of coats sometimes when you're doing something as thorough as this. And we're just doing this one single color for the cab. This is just what I am doing here. We're going to do some other stuff to kind of bring out the detail of this, but one single color for the cab. And now we have our chassis and boiler, which are that black color, and we need to just paint them. So I'm going to start off with the headlight. I'm not putting a headlight in this one. A little bit too small for my first attempt. I may try some stuff like this down the road, but I'm just going to go ahead and paint this the proper color. And then next I'm taking some metallic silver to paint the little bell up here. And then I'm doing a mix of silver and yellow for the whistle. And that will, it actually ends up looking pretty good. There's a few other detail things I want to do with the whistle, but this is where I'm starting right here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, like, these are the tiniest details that I'm going to paint on here. And that is the front of the boiler and the hinges and the latch for it. I decided to go with a hinge and latch since it's a smaller engine rather than it being riveted on. So that is all done, and now I can do some weathering, and I actually start with a white gray dusting. This is actually a snow weathering right here, and just kind of ages the engine almost instantly, and it allows for some of those blacks to really pop out when you're doing this. So you'll notice that I'm weathering this before I do the cab and put everything together. So I'm gonna get that done, and I'm gonna start off with those whites, but I'm also gonna come in with some soot weathering and some rust weathering to just really give this thing some character. And this is really where it starts to sing. You'll notice that I'm also switching between some finer bristle brushes and some stiffer bristle brushes, and this is something that's working very, very well. And once I have all of that weathered up, I can super glue the cab, which I weathered off screen, in place, and you can see where those blacks really made those rivets pop on that wood color. And then I attach the chassis to it, and you'll notice that the drive rod actually falls off, and this is another part of the problem that I ran into, which is basically the drive rods weren't exactly the most mechanically sound things in terms of running efficiently, and the issue that I was running into is basically binding and locking up the engine. So what I ended up doing was removing the drive rods and everything and just letting it be wheels. This is my first engine that I'm scratch building. I'm learning. This is a very small chassis. It has a lot of issues with pickup, because of such a small area, a lot of things will stop it that wouldn't stop other engines. So I'm learning about this. I've got some more chassis ordered that are a little bit bigger. But this is, I think, a good first start. This chassis wasn't too terribly expensive, so I'm okay with this. And I'm still going to keep the engine. I like it. But here is the new little engine. I did super glue some couplers I had laying around onto it, and that's what you're seeing here. Nothing fancy, but yeah, here it is running around the little loop that I have right here.
Horrible, isn't it? Now this is DC, but I could definitely convert it DCC with a Digitrax Z-scale decoder. This will not be the only engine I build in HON30. I'm also considering some rolling stock as well. I will also be building a beginner level engine for those of you that want to try it, that have a 3D printer, and I might install DCC and sound in that one, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, and happy railroading.